Welcome to Building Stories, a podcast where we share funny and honest stories about building, construction, and digital transformation. I'm happy to introduce Andrew Hannell, a digital design, construction, and engineering expert with around 30 years of experience. He's led projects across Australia and Asia, working with top clients, contractors, and consultants. And for the past 6 years, Andrew's been leading a consultancy called Digital Constructors, collaborating with some really important organisations like Sydney Metro, Sydney Airport, and Suburban Rail Loop. And notably, recently, Andrew developed an AI-based solution for automated asset inspections in partnership with Adelaide University. So thanks for coming along, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, and great to join you on the podcast.
Yeah, so we have a few questions we go through. The first one is about your young years. Were there any hints that you would want to be involved in this industry, building, designing, perhaps when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was the type of kid who was either, pulling things apart to work out, what made them work, or, building stuff. Didn't matter if it was like a treehouse or a go-kart, or all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I guess that was a pretty strong indicator of what I'd end up doing.
Yeah. Tell us about your go-kart.
I think we had, it was just like an ongoing project. You always had to, you're never happy with the one you got. You always had to make it kind of faster, put bigger wheels on it, or, improve the steering, or that kind of thing. So, I grew up as a kid in the UK, and we lived right at the top of a really big hill. So, I reckon you could probably hit, 50 or 60 Ks by the time you got down the bottom of the hill. So we managed to survive, but had a lot of fun.
It's still here to tell the tale.
Yes.
So does that that building, that kind of building making kind of exercise, does that lead you to this industry? It's like, okay, well, let's build bigger things, bigger, faster things out on site.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think just the love of, putting something together and, coming up with some ideas. I like the kind of hands-on stuff, putting stuff together, whether it's wood or, bits of wood, or, what I do now is really putting together digital models or databases or, code. I think it's all the same sort of thing, just that love of putting things together and making them work.
You get to university and you're like, okay, well, I want to make an impact in this construction industry, and I can do that by bringing about my own, tool making kind of exercise. Is that where some of that comes in?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I studied architecture and worked as an architect for probably 5 or 6 years. On one hand, architecture is a really rewarding profession. Seeing something that you've designed and built, is very satisfying, and I love that part of it. But I'd probably have to say my heart was never truly in it. There's a lot of stuff that comes with that, dealing with dodgy developers, arguing with councils, all that sort of stuff. And I think that I was never really cut out for the kind of corporate architecture thing. I just, didn't really fit into that sort of thing. I've always preferred maybe going off to doing more my own thing. So, I worked as an architect for, as I say, 5 or 6 years, maybe a few years more, but gradually sort of followed, I guess, more my passions and got into the technology side of things.
Yeah. And so apart from this moment of realizing that the turtleneck jumper doesn't fit anymore, is there this crux or this moment in time you're like, no, I'm done. This is now time for me to really bring this out.
I'm not sure if there was a single sort of defining moment, Michael, where I just kind of made, said that's it, I've had enough. It was more of a, sort of a transition. I had a few roles which back in the day were looking after kind of CAD systems and developing, I'm sure you know what I mean, Lisp routines and all that sort of stuff in CAD. So, yeah, it was pretty much a transition over a few years. But as much as I love architecture and designing things, I don't think I've really ever looked back. I don't... occasionally I think maybe I should have stuck it out, but I think all up, I'm happier doing what I do now.
Yeah. And so, just talk us through some of the things that you're working on now and how the industry has kind of evolved from what it was. We're talking about Lisp routines and AutoCAD days, and now I don't know. The tools have just evolved so much. What is it now, sure. And maybe some of those key moments for the industry over the last, 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, I guess, for most of my career, a lot of people have been saying, oh, you're a dreamer, what you're saying is not realistic, it's never going to happen. And, thankfully, I think many of those people have been proven wrong. So, with the advent of BIM and transition from CAD, at the time it was a pretty hard sell. People were saying, it's a waste of time. It'll never work. But I was quite fortunate early in my career to work at Westfield, who were very early adopters of BIM. Just trying to think back, I remember Revit 8.1, whenever that was, but basically my boss at the time said, yeah, something like that. Yeah. Basically, he said to me that, CAD was a thing of the past. We were going to convert all of the Westfield centres in Australia to BIM models. And at the time, as you might remember, Revit was good for doing a house or a block of flats or something like that. But if you're talking about, massive shopping centres, it really was pushing the boundaries. And, doing that for, I think Westfield had 40 shopping centres at the time. Applying that across all of those buildings was a major exercise. But, I learnt a lot. I did have a full head of hair before I started that. I think by the time I left, that was it. But it was a good learning experience.
Aside from the hair challenges, what other challenges have you faced along this journey? Had decades of experience. Can you pick out one or two challenges that you thought, that was difficult, but we got through it?
Yeah, I think, with this field, I think generally, in some ways, the technology is actually the easy bit. It's the people and the process and all of that kind of thing that's the real challenge. So, it just comes down to the basics of how you bring people. It's a bit of a cliche, but, on the journey, how you convince them, how you sort of put yourself in their shoes to kind of see things from their perspective, and then how you convince them that there might be a better way, and sort of help them in that process. I think all of as I say, technical stuff's kind of easy, but the people stuff is much more of a challenge. And I think quite often it's the thing that's really neglected. People will look at technology implementations as a purely technical exercise, buy this software, set up this server, do this, do that, but completely neglect that sort of personal aspect of it. Yeah. And I think construction in general is a very traditional and conservative industry. There's a lot of kind of built-in resistance and reluctance to change. I think a lot of the kind of technology hype, probably doesn't help. I think that quite often there are false promises or inflated expectations that don't help either. So I've always tried to sort of be very practical and realistic and just concentrate on the important stuff, making the job easier rather than making it more complicated or anything else. Yeah.
And that's really hard, right? Like you're wanting to, you want to sit behind the computer and where if we all align our vision, this is what it's going to look like. But now I've got to step away from the computer and I've actually got to bring these people, like I said, bring them along the journey. I've got to articulate what this vision is going to look like, and I've got to get buy-in now.
Yeah, that's right.
What are you most proud of in your career to date? So some particular project or some accomplishment during your personal career?
Yeah, I've worked on a few interesting projects. I worked for a few years in Asia and worked on some unusual jobs. I worked on a Wild West theme park in Taiwan. It's on site, which is a bit of a strange one. Built a Mormon temple in Hong Kong. But probably the project that I sort of count as my number one would be a project at the Sydney Opera House. I was working for a contractor at the time for a couple of years on site for a major project there. So, it was just a great project to be involved in. And it was the first BIM project for both the contractor and also for the Opera House. So once again, learnt a lot, but just a real privilege to work on that building.
Very iconic,
for sure.
And what about some advice? So we kind of talked a little bit about your journey, but you now imagine someone coming up out of high school. They're trying to decide what to do. What piece of advice would you give them if they're interested in working in the design and construction space?
I probably have to say just kind of follow your heart and do what you love doing. Ignore your parents if they say, become a dentist or an accountant, any of that sort of stuff. Or even if they say to you, become an architect. I love what I do, and I think if it's something that you really love doing, it's obviously a job, you get paid for it, but I think having a job that you didn't really love doing would be a pretty poor way to go through life. So that'd be my advice. I mean, I think in design and construction there are some great careers. I think that quite a few engineers and architects end up doing fairly mundane work. Some people are happy with that, but there's some really exciting things to be involved in. And as I said, it is very rewarding to be part of building something. Could be a building, could be something like a railway, which I've worked on, and to see those sorts of things come into operation and people actually using them is pretty satisfying.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing more and more is people talking about how important it is who you work with as well. Would you agree?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that.
What about mistakes? Now, you don't have to tell us all your mistakes, but is there any perhaps things along the way where you may have made a mistake or wish you had done something slightly different that you would like to share, maybe so that others can learn from your mistakes?
Yeah, look, I've made loads of them. Where do I start? Probably one thing I wish I'd done earlier in my career was sort of basically start working for myself, which I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. I wouldn't really say it's a mistake as such, but I do think that I probably should have done it sooner. As I said before, I was never really cut out for the kind of corporate life. I probably wouldn't have risen up through the ranks, and things like job titles and that kind of thing didn't really matter to me. But for the last 5 or 6 years that I've been working for myself, I've been very fortunate to have some great clients, work on some interesting projects, do stuff that's, interesting and I think valued by my clients. So, as I say, not really a big cock up or a big big error, but more just something that in hindsight I probably should have done, maybe after I'd been out of uni for 5 or 10 years rather than like 15 years. Yeah.
I mean, as well, because responsibility kicks in, doesn't it, as you get older in those bigger decisions?
Yeah, that's right. Kids and mortgages and all that sort of stuff. It's not easy, but I think probably having a bit more sort of self-confidence or having the sort of guts to give it a go. I mean, if it never works out, you can always go back to your sort of corporate, architecture or construction projects. That it's not like a one-way street. But I mean, you guys probably know exactly what I mean. Feels like a bit of a plunge at the time, but and I've had a few sort of lean patches, but generally speaking, I've picked up work when I need it, and in the last few years, I've probably been able to be a bit more selective about, who I work with. It's not like I'm, turning away work all the time, but there is a bit of sort of a bit of a luxury there where if I kind of like a group of people or like the organisation, I'll do my best to work with them. And conversely, if there are some that I just don't have that sort of right gut feeling about them, I'll manage to do something else instead. Yeah.
Andrew, when you're like stepping out on your own, and I'm sure, there's a lot of times where you've had to, work on jobs or do things that weren't the most interesting or they, didn't tickle your fancy so much. But I am really curious about what gets you most interested, and where you want to go to in the future. Like, you do get to work on these projects or these ideas or these tools even that are very future orientated, that get to be outside the box. So, Andrew, could you tell us what gets you really excited about the future? Like, what do you get to work on, or what do you want to work on down the track?
Yeah, I mean, the technology is such a fast-moving field that it's difficult to keep up, but it's also quite exciting at the same time. There's always something new coming along. And, in the last few years, it was actually during COVID that I was getting a bit bored. So I did some study in machine learning, which was really interesting. The course I did was through MIT. It was an online thing. And I think the course itself was fairly ordinary, in my opinion, but it sort of opened the door to me to the whole world of machine learning, artificial intelligence. And although there's quite a lot of hype about AI, it's going to change everything, we'll all lose our jobs, all that sort of stuff, I think there are some huge opportunities for construction within that, and that in many cases it's the basic simple stuff. A lot of construction engineers might spend a huge part of their day just entering data, collating data, processing data, all that sort of stuff. And a lot of these projects have enormous costs, have environmental, social, community impacts. So I think there are massive opportunities to improve it. And, I find that really exciting and sort of motivating.
Yeah, that's cool. And I love how that curiosity is what sort of leads you there. Okay, so I'm curious, what does this mean? It's midway through COVID. You're probably in lockdown, so you can't do anything anyway. But that starts opening up. Okay, now what can we do with this? And is there any? Have you got any ideas, Andrew, that you want to share of like, you know what, if we were able to tweak this is what kind of an impact this is going to have on site?
Yeah, I did. I'm just trying to think. On my blog, probably 6 months ago, I put together a list of just a few ideas of opportunities within construction. Off the top of my head, I can't remember all of them, but it sort of covered a fairly wide range of aspects. I mean, maybe one that comes to mind is when it comes to some design tasks. It might be designing a concrete mix. It might be designing a structure or a mechanical system. Quite often, even just a marginal improvement in the design of that thing, whatever it is, has a really big benefit. It might be a financial benefit. If you can make your concrete 5% cheaper or 5% more durable or something like that for a project like a railway with a lifespan of 100 years, that makes a big difference. If you can, say, optimize a design of a mechanical air conditioning system over a lifespan of 50 years, that might equate to millions of dollars of energy or thousands of tons of CO2 emissions. So I think, to my mind, a lot of the opportunities with AI in construction are just kind of incremental improvements. You're not going to suddenly make a project 50% cheaper through the use of AI, but you might make it kind of 1 or 2% cheaper, 3 or 4% faster, 5% fewer emissions. When it comes to operating it, it might be a railway that's 2% better than the other one. So I think all these things add up, and I think that's where most of the opportunities are in construction, and that of course translates to some really big numbers financially as well.
And I love the idea of the responsibility getting brought back into it. Okay, so these tools are actually going to enable you to be more responsible for the environment or the impact that your project is going to have on a site or to a client. That's really cool. I hadn't thought about that, and I love the marginal differences that add up over time. That's cool.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, as I say, it's a bit of a cliche, but if you can go for some really so-called quick wins, just things that are simple and practical but make a big difference, I think that's really the way to introduce some of this change. If you try and do something that's too ambitious, it's too complicated, takes too long, people lose interest. You might say, well, if we do this, it's going to have a huge benefit. But quite often those sorts of really big changes are much, much harder. In my experience, it's better to just do kind of stepping stones of, gradual improvements. And so rather than say, we're going to save 20% on this project, it might be, well, we'll do this and it'll save 1%. We'll do this, it saves 0.5%. Do something else, saves a little bit more, and just kind of build up from that.
Well,
I really like it. It's tips of wisdom.
The margins are so tight anyway that a lot of the wins are in those few percent. The project can kind of
that's right.
Profit or not.
For sure. Yeah.
Knowing a little bit about your projects that you've worked on in the development space, you've worked on projects that include hardware, cloud, and kind of software and machine learning. How do you kind of see all these things interacting? Because not just one piece of AI kit that is going to solve all the problems, is it? It's got to be something else.
Yeah, sure. There are a lot of kind of moving parts that need to fit together. I mean, I'd say when it comes to the project I've been doing with Adelaide Uni on machine learning within construction, really the AI part is pretty simple. The difficult part is getting the, say, quality data that you need to train a model. And most construction and engineering companies are terrible at managing data. I'm sure with deep space, this is just a challenge you encounter every day. Most contractors and engineers have got 1,000,001 spreadsheets, and they're all, different. The data's there, but it's just very inconsistent and low quality. So when it comes to AI, all of these models, it doesn't matter if it's computer vision or generative AI, they all rely on quality data. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge. The sort of hardware and software and cloud and so forth, I probably have to say that's sort of the easier bit, but getting the data that you need in the first place is the real challenge.
Is there something around that we as an industry have to educate, or how do we move the needle on something like that, Andrew? What are you saying to builders to make changes in that respect?
I think it really comes down to explaining it or putting a case forward that makes life easier or better for the people involved. If you come up with a list of reasons why a particular thing should be done in a particular way, if the result of that is that it makes more work, or it's slower, or it's harder for anybody involved, it's almost certain to fail. So I think putting a case forward and kind of framing it in a way that people understand that it will actually make their life easier is the number one factor. So when it comes to, perhaps convincing an engineer why it would be better for them to put certain data into a proper database rather than an Excel spreadsheet, I think it comes down to demonstrating what the benefit to them is, how it improves their work or their performance or anything else. And that really comes down to putting yourself in their shoes and understanding it from their perspective. And I think it depends on the person, but I think generally people are sort of receptive to that if they can be convinced, the benefits to them, then they're much more likely to sort of follow you in a particular direction.
Yeah, it's the same question, same people-related, problems that we were talking about 15 years ago when we were moving over to Revit. It's the same problem. We've got people, and we've got to show them the way, and we've got to show them, why something's better, and give them the right tools.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what do you think? I think coming out of that question, what I wonder is, what does the builder of the future look like to you, Andrew? Like someone, what separates one business from another business? Is there a builder in the future that's going to get something right that the others aren't? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question, Michael. I think when you talk about AI and construction, the natural response would be people would think about, robot workers and, machines that lay bricks and all that sort of stuff. But I think that it's probably a bit simpler than that. I think that the contractor of the future really needs to be prepared to change. I'm sure you guys experience exactly the same thing with your work, that the most construction, or the kind of prevailing thinking in construction is you do one project exactly the same as the way you did the last project. And I think challenging that thinking is a real challenge. So I think contractors of the future would be much more willing to to reject that assumption that you just do every project the same as the last one, because I mean it's pretty obvious if you do that you're never going to get better. You won't be able to outcompete anybody else. So I think it's more of a cultural shift rather than a technical one. And I think part of that is being willing to take a risk, accepting that not everything will succeed.
I like that.
Yeah. I think if everything succeeds, you're probably not trying hard enough. And I think you have to accept that some things will not work. But that's just part of improving the way you deliver projects. So
I think that in there is this kind of ideology that you don't accept the status quo anymore, but you actually embed improvement into your aims.
Yeah.
We're actually going to try to improve next time around. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think a large part of it is understanding that to do that, it's not just adding more and more stuff. You have to remove things as well. So, for instance, I see quite a few projects where they'll say, we're going to produce traditional drawings, and we're going to produce models, and we're going to produce databases, and we're going to produce all of this stuff. And I've worked on a few projects where say drawings are still used, but they're less important. The primary mechanism for design coordination or that kind of stuff will actually be the models, and the drawings are kind of secondary. So I think part of that innovation process is not just adding and adding and adding new things. It's about saying, these are the things we're going to remove. And the reason for doing that is it makes it more efficient, it makes it more effective. There's a better method to achieve the same outcome, and that sort of thinking. So my experience working in construction over the last 30 years is that a lot of it has just got more and more complicated, and things have just been added on. Not much has actually been removed. So I don't know if there are any facts and figures on this, but I'd guess that construction today might actually be a bit slower and more expensive than it was 30 years ago. I'm not sure.
And coming out from that, you've worked in the past with architects. Designers, how are they going to be impacted with this collaborative nature? They're like, the builder's got to be able to change. They've got to be able to move forward. But they're going to bring along, that supply chain or the consulting team, maybe kicking and screaming to some respect. But thinking back, Andrew, to your time at, this architectural office, how are they going to be? What are they going to adjust? How are they going to respond to this builder of the future? Or even better, how are they going to lead the way as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think things like, BIM has fundamentally changed the way that design consultants work. It's obviously kind of front-loaded a lot of their work. So that the typical designers, whether they're an architect or an engineer or anybody else, in days gone by, they might have been cranking out drawings from day one. You could say, we'll produce, so many drawings per person per week, and that would be it. But I guess BIM has meant that there's a lot more kind of upfront work. But once you've, say, completed a model, and during that time there might be 0 drawings produced, suddenly all of the design documentation falls out of that, what was derived from that model pretty quickly. So I think, there have been quite a few dramatic changes for designers already. But, I think in the future, the amount of effort that most designers spend into producing documentation, once again, I don't know what the figures are, but you might say that, 5 or 10 or 20% is kind of pure design. All the rest is just churning out documents and drawings. I think that new technologies will probably make a significant difference to that. So, just basic tasks like, 20 years ago, uprevving, 1,000 drawings and reissuing them and convert PDFs, all that business. It could take a couple of people, weeks to do that. But, with the evolution of these tools, some tasks like that might be, probably not, it's not just a single press of the button, but a lot quicker. And I think the same will apply to other documentation sort of tasks in, across disciplines.
Yeah. The BIM discipline itself, like you've been around for kind of its emergence.
Yeah.
What do you think is the future? Because like we kind of have a view on this, but like there's now everybody's attached BIM to their name. I'm a BIM architect. I'm BIM this, I'm BIM that. They haven't necessarily done a course or necessarily have experience. Where do you think that's going to kind of how that's going to play out in the future?
Yeah, I think there will always be a place for true specialists in this area, but when I see a title like digital engineer, it kind of makes me wonder. It's 2024. Surely, in this day and age, every engineer, is kind of a digital engineer. So I think a lot of it comes down to putting the tools into the hands of the people who are actually doing the job. I think there's still a little bit of this, but BIM seems to be seen as some sort of dark art. You've got a bunch of people sitting in a dark room doing secret BIM stuff, and there might be another group of people who are actually designing and, working on the project who are still doing stuff exactly the way they would have done 15 years ago.
And there are two groups of people throw rocks at each other.
That's right. Yeah. Just blame each other for any problems. I think that's changed. I think if you go to most architectural offices, there will be people. There will be some sort of distinction between people who are producing documents, but it's not like the old days where you had like a drafting office who are purely just putting pen or CAD on paper and a bunch of other people giving them red line markups. I think that's changed a lot, but I think that that'll probably evolve even further. I do still see a bit of that distinction, but to my mind, for it to be successful, these tools really need to be in the hands of the people doing the job. They need to have those skills and capabilities. To me, it seems like a fairly old-fashioned notion that you've got kind of two people doing one person's job, one person doing the drawings and one person telling the other person how to do the drawings. To me, it just doesn't make sense.
You brought up that example of revving up the drawings, and you just think like that is we shouldn't have people doing that. Why?
That's right.
Why? Like that has got to be a computer has sorted that out, and
that's right.
Like it's working at a higher order of magnitude, right? The value that you're going to provide a project is got to be much greater than revving up a series of drawings. So you're going to move over here. The computer's now going to do that part, but now what are you going to be working on? Maybe you're in there sorting the data out at a higher level.
Well, my argument is always that by improving these processes, it frees up, highly qualified, highly trained people to focus on higher value work. I see a lot of construction projects where you might have engineers, they've been to uni, they've got the, member of the Institute of Engineers or whatever it is, and they're spending 80% of their time just doing data entry into Excel. So I think that, for those people, freeing them up to work on higher value work and also doing work that I'm sure is much more interesting than filling in spreadsheets. I think that's, that's probably going to change into the future.
And have you seen that yourself? Like you've been this expert, you've worked in projects, but have you seen your own value shift to be more of a training, digital transformation kind of role in some cases?
Yeah. I usually try and take on I guess, more like a mentoring sort of role where, you not talking about training as in like classroom training, but really just varying from kind of hand-holding to guidance to sort of maybe helping with some of the kind of harder bits of work just to get people to improve their own skills and sort of, what is it? Teach a man to fish, that sort of approach. That's the way I see it.
You think back to your time on the billy cart. You don't want to be sitting drawing the billy cart all day. You don't want to be doing the data entry on whether the billy cart's going to go downhill or not. You want to be on the tool and in it as fast as you can, right?
That's right. Yeah,
I like that with the. With all these, and I've seen it myself, like all these graduates that are coming out of uni, they're ready to, change the construction industry, and then, oh no, you're just going to sit at a computer and go through emails and make sure the drawing register matches up with what we've got in PDF. Like it's crazy.
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just got to get in the billy cart and go.
That's right.
Well, we have this quick fire round, and I think particularly as we've been talking about billy carts and go-karts going downhill, it's a very important question. You've got 3 tools to choose from. You've got a hammer, a screwdriver, or some duct tape. Now, you got to get that billy cart down to the finish line. What are you going to grab?
I'd probably have to say the duct tape, but or a hammer. Yeah, between the two of one of those two.
Yeah, I love it. Now, we've also got a material-related question. Is it going to be concrete, steel, or timber?
I mean, in terms of a great material to work with, I love working with timber. Steel and concrete, they're just pretty. It's more of like a wrestling match, but timber is
more sustainable.
Yeah, something very sort of satisfying to working with timber.
Yeah, the margins of error with the other two are a lot smaller. Yeah. That's really good. Andrew, it's been awesome to talk to you. You've given us a lot of wisdom and you've shared a lot of stories. I think it's been really good just to hear, even both from the architectural side of things, how it works out in practice, and also everything that you've brought on the journey, all the things that you've picked up running your own business and now are doing more for construction. It's been really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, really enjoyed it. And
Thanks, mate. Thank you very much.